Have you ever wondered what it feels like to hold a millionaire's ticket in your hand in the morning? But by the afternoon, you don't have enough money to buy a loaf of bread? In 1929, an entire generation of Americans went to sleep in luxury and woke up to a 10-year nightmare. No war, no natural disaster, only a quiet but devastating collapse more devastating than any weapon. Welcome to the Roaring '20s era, where people borrowed the future to buy the glamour of the present. Henry Ford changed the world by getting a Model T car rolling off the assembly line in just 90 minutes. But this very efficiency sowed the seeds of disaster, overproduction. When every household had a refrigerator and a car, factories continued to operate at full capacity. Depleted purchasing power. Workers' wages did not keep pace with the rate of machinery production. When goods went unsold, the economy began to bottleneck. The stock market in the 1920s was like a giant casino, where everyone thought they would win. Margin leverage 110. With just 10 units of currency, you could borrow 90 units to buy stocks. This was a ticking time bomb because if the price dropped even slightly, you would lose everything and accumulate massive debt. Vibe economics. People didn't care how the businesses were doing. They bought stocks because they heard it would go up. When even barbers and shoemakers offer financial advice, that's when the bubble is about to burst. While New York was ablaze with lights, the American countryside had long been in decline. American farmers, after overexpanding during World War I, now faced plummeting agricultural prices. They borrowed money to buy new machinery. But the more they worked, the more losses they incurred. The countryside was the first domino to fall before disaster reached Wall Street. The core mistake of this period was complacency. Americans believed they had found the formula for eternal prosperity, forgetting that all growth based on debt would eventually come at a price. The leap off the cliff and the collapse of the lifeline 1-9-9-193 to imagine standing in front of an ATM. But instead of getting cash, you see a sign that says closed. You turn to the bank next door, then the one next door, and they're all locked. In less than 3 years, over 9,000 banks in the U.S. vanished, along with the savings, tuition fees, and retirement funds of millions of families. Wall Street didn't just go broke, they inadvertently drained the lifeblood of the entire economy. How could a few numbers dancing on an electronic board bring a superpower to its knees? Black Tuesday, when the miracle fades. October 29, 1929, was not just a day of price drops, it was a chaotic sell-off, margin call pressure. As stock prices fell, brokers simultaneously called investors demanding they deposit more cash immediately to maintain their positions. Lacking funds, they were forced to sell off at any cost. Snowball effect. The more people sold, the deeper the price fell. In one day, $14 billion worth of assets vanished. People who had been discussing buying mansions the day before were now lining up for bread. Bank runs. This is where many people misunderstand. Stock price drops don't directly kill the economy, but the loss of confidence does. Systemic error. Banks at the time used deposits from people invested in stocks or margin lending. When the market collapsed, banks became insolvent. Hermit mentality. Rumors of banks running out of money spread like wildfire. Thousands of people lined up desperately to withdraw their money bank run. Because banks never keep 100% cash on hand, they are forced to declare bankruptcy. When a bank collapses, it drags local businesses down because they no longer have access to loans. The fatal mistake at this stage was the lack of intervention by the Federal Reserve Fed. Instead of injecting money to rescue banks and maintain liquidity, the Fed tightened monetary policy out of fear of inflation. They inadvertently turned off the oxygen valve when the patient was struggling the most. When Mother Earth betrays and the paralysis of power 1930 to 1932. Do you think losing all your money is the ultimate tragedy? Imagine a midday in the American heartland, the sun suddenly disappears, and a wall of dust thousands of meters high, as black as ink, swallows an entire town. You can't breathe, you can't eat, and you watch the fields that fed your family turn into a desert overnight. This isn't an apocalyptic movie. This is the Dust Bowl, the cruel slap of nature to a dying economy. And in the midst of all that, the government could only advise you, be patient. Dust Bowl, a double disaster from natural and man-made. If the stock market killed the dreams of the wealthy, then the Dust Bowl destroyed the hopes of farmers. Human error. In the 1920s, farmers overplowed pristine grasslands to grow wheat. When prolonged drought struck, the topsoil, devoid of grass roots, turned into fine dust. Black blizzards. Powerful winds swept away millions of tons of soil, obscuring the sun and seeping into people's lungs and every bowl of soup. Livestock suffocated, crops were lost. Desperate migration. Millions of Okies refugees from Oklahoma and neighboring states loaded their belongings onto dilapidated vehicles, heading towards California. They became homeless in their own homeland, ostracized and despised. Herbert Hoover and the do-nothing philosophy. President Herbert Hoover wasn't a bad person, but he was an outdated administrator in the face of an unprecedented crisis. Belief in rugged individualism. He believed that direct government aid would spoil the population, depriving them of their will to be self-reliant. He demanded that private charities shoulder the burden of feeding millions of starving people, a task beyond their capacity. Economic mistakes. Hoover still tried to balance the budget and maintain the value of the USD in gold when the economy needed cash more than ever. This was like trying to keep clothes wrinkle-free while the house was on fire. Symbol of failure. His name became synonymous with misery. Hoovervilles were cardboard slum villages, and Hoover blankets were old newspapers used for warmth. The peak of outrage. Bonus Army. In 1932, the people's patience had reached its limit. Reaching the limit. Thousands of World War I veterans flocked to Washington demanding early payouts to support their families. Instead of dialogue, Hoover used the military to disperse them with tear gas and bayonets. The image of national heroes being attacked by their own army became indelible in Hoover's political career. Hoover's failure proved a costly lesson. In crisis, theoretical rigidity is poison. When the free market completely fails, the role of the visible hand government is no longer an option, but a matter of survival. FDR and the Great Surgery that changed the fate of America 1933 to 1939. Imagine a man who couldn't walk on his own defeat, yet promised to help a nation on its knees stand up. When Franklin D. Roosevelt took office in 1933, America was not only out of money, it had lost all hope. With the words, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," he launched a campaign that completely changed the DNA of capitalism. This wasn't just bailout, it was a restructuring of how the world operates. The first 100 days, stopping the bleeding in the economy. Roosevelt understood that if he didn't save the banking system, everything would collapse permanently. Bank holiday. Immediately after taking office, he closed all banks for 4 days. Not as punishment, but to check which banks were still healthy enough to reopen. fireside chats. He used the radio to explain directly to the people that your money is safer in the bank than under the mattress. The results were miraculous. When the banks reopened, people lined up to deposit money instead of withdrawing it. Confidence returned. The visible hand of government, relief, and jobs. Instead of handing out free money, FDR created jobs. The Labor Army CCC and WPA. Millions of young people were sent into forests to plant trees, build parks, and hydroelectric dams. They received wages, discipline, and, most importantly, regained their dignity. Lighting up the darkness TVA, the Tennessee Valley Project built dams, bringing electricity to the poorest rural areas. For the first time, farming families saw electric lights, a symbol of modernity, changing the rules of the game, building a safe foundation. FDIC foreign direct investment insurance. From then on, even if a bank collapsed, the government guaranteed the return of money to the people. The nightmare of losing all your savings officially ended. Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) established strict regulations to prevent price manipulation and reckless borrowing on Wall Street. Social Security. For the first time in American history, the state took responsibility for caring for the elderly and disabled. This was a turning point that transformed America into a modern welfare state. Roosevelt's genius lay in saving capitalism by partially socializing it. He understood that for a free market to survive, it needed a fair foundation and a safety net for the vulnerable. However, conservatives at the time called him a dictator or a communist. The War Machine and the Resurrection from the Ruins, 1939 to 1945. There's a bitter truth economists often whisper to each other. Even FDR's most humane relief policies couldn't end the Great Depression. What truly swept away unemployment and restored America to superpower status wasn't dams or green trees, but guns and the roar of fighter jet engines. America escaped the mire of starvation by becoming the arms of democracy. Perhaps the most enduring prosperity is always built from the greatest conflicts. When the New Deal reaches its limit, although FDR's policies helped America hold on, by 1937 the economy showed signs of stagnation. Unemployment remained high, and production had yet to return to its golden age. The New Deal was a great painkiller, but it wasn't strong enough to cure the global recession. The impetus from World War II, a massive boost. In September 1939, the sound of gunfire in Europe changed everything. Full mobilization. When the U.S. entered the war after Pearl Harbor, the economic goal shifted from relief to military production. All the car factories switched to making tanks. The garment factories switched to making military uniforms. Eliminating unemployment. Millions of men went to war. Millions of women went to the factories symbolized by Rosie the Riveter. For the first time in over a decade, America experienced a labor shortage instead of a surplus. The power of GDP. Government spending soared to unprecedented levels. The enormous public debt was no longer a fear, as it was being poured into a production line with a guaranteed output. Victory. Legacy and hard-earned lessons. The United States emerged from the Great Depression and World War II with a completely new face, a financial superpower. The Bretton Woods system was born, making the USD the world's reserve currency. The middle class, returning soldiers with government benefits, created a wave of home and car purchases and a baby boom. Lessons on intervention. The world understood that a completely unregulated economy laissez-faire can lead to tragedy, and state regulation is an indispensable safety valve. Conclusion. The Great Depression was a harsh test of human resilience and institutional flexibility. It proved that trust is the most valuable asset, and debt is the most terrifying specter of all time. Looking back at history, we should actually thank the Great Depression, because without its devastating impact, America would forever remain a backward agricultural nation with outdated banks, never achieving the wealth and hegemonic power it enjoys today. Ultimately, poverty was the painful gift America needed to grow. Do you agree, or is this a cruel justification? If the scenario of 1929 were to repeat itself tomorrow with the current crypto or real estate markets, do you believe you are adequately prepared? Or will you be the first in line for free soup? Leave your opinion in the comments below, and I will respond with the most interesting analysis. Lessons from the past are the map that will guide us in the future. If you find this economic analysis interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We will meet again in more in-depth videos analyzing world-changing events. Thank you for your support, and remember, never invest based on a vibe.